Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio. This is our fifth, I believe, and final installment of the Probably Not re-record. Ernesto and I have had a lot of fun doing this. It's kind of cool to find a song on the hard drive that we actually recorded about 11 years ago, but we wrote in like 2004. And the first time we ever actually played this was at a live concert at Musicians Institute in 2005. Took us all the way till 2009, I think, maybe 2010 to try to record it. Never finished it. And then we discovered it and decided the drums actually weren't too bad, so we recorded everything else. So that's been the whole process. It's been a whole lot of fun. We've enjoyed it. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. Now, before we get started, I do want to say if any of you are interested in the drum reamping, if you're home, in your home studio, in your rehearsal space, garage or something, and want to add a real room with some real ambience, I have some great deals going on right now. I've actually been doing quite a bit of this for people lately, so I figured it was time to roll out some affordable packages. And especially right now while we're all stuck in this quarantine world, we're at home, it's a great way to work together. We can use Skype so we can do the session at the same time, so we'll virtually be in the same session. But there's some great packages, so if you're interested in that, I'll put the link down in the description. All right, on to the mix. I think what I want to start with real quick is just the setup. Now there's a lot of stuff going in this. I'm just going to pick some of the highlights that I think are cool, and I did have to do a little bit of experimenting, so there's a few things that I haven't really done before. I'll go through those because I think they're cool. But I'm going to start with just the overall setup because that kind of doesn't change for me too much mix to mix anyway. All right, so first off, I always have my drums first on the console, followed by the bass, followed by guitars and keys, and if this were a vocal song, then vocals. The vocals always live in the last four channels. In this case, there are no vocals, so I put something else there. Now, the drums are the first 12 channels, and I always try to keep it to 12 channels, if possible, just so I have room for everything else. Sometimes it's a little bit less. In this case, I had 3 toms, but I went ahead and grouped them into 2. So I have a little bit of compression coming from in the box, a little bit of EQ, and then I added a little more here on the console. The drums always go to a few places. First off, it goes to the main drum bus, which is my Orban 622 EQ, followed by a Heritage Audio successor, which is new because I've been getting to play with that. I'm in love with it. It sounds fantastic. Then I'm running that into the Rupert Neve 542 tape emulators, and I am hitting that quite hard. Then there's also on bus 3 and 4 is the drum parallel compression, which is a Tonelux TX5C compressors into Tonelux EQ5P EQ, hence the EQ part of the 5P. And that's always the same. Now on top of that, and this doesn't happen every time, but it does more on the heavier stuff, I also have another set of parallels for the kick and the snare. The kick parallel comes up on its corresponding monitor channel here on 1, and the snare on its corresponding monitor input on 2. And those are always my dynamite, the Valley People dynamites. The drum bus, what I'm sending there, if you can see up here at the top, is pretty much all the drums are going to bus 1 and 2. The drum parallel compression is only getting kick, snare, and toms. So I got my kick, snare, toms, snare 2. And I'll get us in the specifics of the settings of that in a minute, but that's always kind of the same. Sometimes I'll run the overheads if I need extra excitement, but usually on the EQ5P, I'm rolling off a little top because cymbals can get a little gnarly there sometimes. So in this case, I'm not sending any cymbals over there. Next is the bass. It's on 13, also has its own corresponding parallel. The bass is going to bus 8 over here. Usually bus 7 and 8 is my vocal bus. But in this case, since I have no vocals and I needed a little extra headroom on the bass to match and get up with everything else, and this bus section has a lot of headroom, it's fantastic. I ended up sending the bass over to bus 8, which is why you see it right here. It's actually panned to the right, because up here I have it going to 7, 8, pan it to the right so it shows up only on 8. So this is actually my master bus over here, or master bass channel over here. Next is the guitars. I'm doing a few things. There's quite a few guitar tracks in here. So first off, on 15 and 16 are all my heavy guitars. I have grouped them in the box to come out 15 and 16. So they're panned hard left and hard right here, and then all the other decisions are in Logic. The same thing with all the clean guitars. They all come out 17 and 18, so any panning is done in the box. Then there's a lead on the third pre-chorus that comes out its own here because I wanted a little bit different EQ. The verse melodies and the guitar solos have their own channels. And then there's a loop that's on the chorus underneath the drums, and then all the synth stuff is coming out 23, 24. All right, so that's the basic setup here. A couple other things. Up here on the effects returns. Effects return 1 is my TC Electronics M350, which is a really inexpensive reverb that I love for just basic ambience on things. It gets used a lot on drums, guitars. Sometimes I even send the vocals there. In this case, clean guitars are getting a little. The snare and toms are getting a little bit as well. Then, not using what's on 2. On 3 is always my SPX 90. In this case, it is a early reflection just for the melody and the guitar solos, which is coming here from aux 2. And anywhere you see these little tape guys, that's so I can see what aux sends I'm using quickly without having to guess. Not using these next two. The Pro VLA always comes up here on effects return 6. That is usually my vocal parallel compression. In this case, I'm using it on the guitar melody and the guitar solo. I love how it's not necessarily an exciting thing, but it is thick and full and it adds some girth. Next, this is my in-the-box effects return, which is effects return 7. That is output 25 and 26 out of my I/O, and that is always the same. That way, if I do have any effects in the box, and I do on this track, on this song, it always comes up here. Now here's my favorite. Effects return 8 is what I call my effects bus return. That is this computer that's over here, right here. And I'm gonna get to that in a second. That allows me to use all my outboard effects that are over here and have automation, volume control, and all sorts of fun like that. I'll get to that in a second. That is the basic setup of the console. Next up is a few things in the box, and then we're gonna take a listen to something. I don't wanna talk too much, which if you've seen any of my videos, you know I do. I can admit it, I'm cool with that. All right, so first off, you can see right here, I do have, all the drums are first, so it basically mirrors the console. I have cleaned up the toms. I don't always do this. In this case, this was recorded so long ago, and the toms sounded good, but at that point in my recording career, I wasn't as great with some of the details of some of the mic placement of getting, not only capturing the sound I wanted, but mitigating certain bleed and whatnot. So I just decided to go ahead and clean the toms up so I could really kind of hyper EQ if I needed to, and I kind of did. The bass, we have our DI that you saw, if you saw the bass reamp video, that was that, and then our amp and the distortion. Then all of these guys right here, these bright green ones, that's all our heavy guitars. It's coming out 15 and 16. Followed by clean guitars that are coming out 17 and 18, and then there's the PC3 arpeggio, which is kind of the lead that comes out on its own on 14, and then the melody and solos that come out on 19 and 20, and then followed by finally all our separate, well, there's quite a few of them down here, different synths, there's some pads, some choirs that are kind of cool, and that is all coming out 23, 24. So let's go ahead, before we go any further, I'm gonna run this from verse 2 through that second chorus, because you'll get an idea of everything that's in this track, and then we'll dissect a few things, all right? So here we go. right, so that's got a little bit of everything. Yeah, there's a drum solo, guitar solo, and maybe we'll go through a little bit of that in a minute, but that's kind of an overall example of the different elements that are in this. So let's start with the drums, because although I did some drum reamping, they got the least attention through the re-recording process, and I was hoping I was going to be able to add some attitude, because initially they sounded good, but sometimes good and boring are the same. And personally, I am more interested in interesting than good any day of the week. Because like I said, sometimes you don't remember good, but you remember interesting, even if you didn't like it. So first off, the drums, I'm going to solo up this. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to mute out everybody but the drums. So this is just, let me get rid of the in-the-box effects. And yeah, that should do it. So here's just our drum sound. I'm going to start with verse 2. All right, so that's kind of an idea. So let me just, here is just what the drum bus sounds like. So I turn the parallel compression off, and I'm going to turn the dynamites off that are on the kick and the snare. So that is just going through the 622 into the successor into the 542s. So the parallel compression sounds like this. That is, here, let me get it with some a little bit toms here too. So here's the fill going into that chorus. As you can tell, I'm spanking it pretty hard with the Tone Lux, and I love the Tone Lux TX5C for this. It has a cool kind of pushed mid-range, but you can really smack something without completely losing what's going on with the transient, especially on drums. And then on the EQ5P, like I said, I'm rolling off a little bit of top. I almost always push somewhere between 2 and 4K, usually pulling a little bit of low mid, not doing anything on the bottom end on this. Okay, so let's hear just what the dynamites sound like, and then I'll kind of put all this stuff together. Here's the dynamite kick. So it's kind of sloppy. It's really, I am squashing it because I'm looking for like boom. I want some length out of that one, but you can hear there's also snare drum and whatnot in there. Now here is the dynamite that's on the snare. But I'm doing this a little bit different. Whereas the dynamite on the kick drum, I'm squashing, so I want length out of it, so it adds some boominess to the kick drum, so it feels more alive, that wasn't in the original sound. What I'm doing for the snare is different, and this was an experiment. I just started plugging stuff in, I was looking for sound. So it's going into the dynamite, but I'm using it as an expander to tighten it up. Then it's going to the Elisa's 3630, which I love. I've modded mine so it's a little bit cleaner, but I like the splattiness of it. And I was looking for a little excitement, so I figured go to the Dirty 630. Then it's followed by one of my Trident A-Range EQs, and honestly, I just kind of shut my eyes and started moving stuff. What I ended up doing is boosting a lot of 250 hertz and a lot of 1K, and I think I'm also rolling off the bottom and rolling off the top with the low pass at 9K. And it just sounded kind of gnarly, and you can hear it is kind of gnarly sounding. And you can also hear how the dynamite is expanding and pulling down the cymbals around it, made it tighter. So the kick and the snare getting a totally different treatment with their extra parallels. Now there are a few things going on in the box with the toms. So let's go, I'm gonna go back. This is the main drum bus. We'll hear that tom fill again. Actually, I want to bring in the parallel compression first and see how that changes our sound. it actually adds, it brings things forward a little more. It's not a drastic change in volume. Sometimes it is, because I like the parallel better than the original, but in this case, it was more of just helping kind of make things punch through a little bit more. So the toms have a couple things going. Like I said, I've got 2 racks and a floor on this track. They sounded okay. They weren't the greatest, but I didn't want to use any samples or anything on this. I wanted to see if I could create vibe with what I had and just see where that led me. So here's what I did. I did a little cleanup first off on each of the toms. You can see tom 1 there, tom 2, tom 3, which is the floor. And I always use the channel EQ from Logic for that. It's great for just cleaning stuff up. Then I went into the fun stuff, and these are the new plugins from Silo Sound Labs, which are the Trident EQs. There's an 80B and then this 9066. I am going to do a video on these sometime soon because these are pretty cool. So I'm doing, here, let me move these over so you can see what's going on in each tom. So couple cool things about these EQs is the high and low filters are a bit different than a normal high and low filter that's just lopping something off. The shape is a bit different and it contours as you change the slope. So it gives you the ability, like on the bottom, to actually knock some bottom off and then push some more bottom. And it has the ability of cleaning up the muddiness while not sounding like you've just completely chopped it off, and then you can boost some and have make something big. As you can see, I'm also using the high cut because the filters are great, and then variations of the low, mid, and high. The mid-range section on this thing is fantastic, especially on a drum bus, but on toms it's cool too. It just has a way of punching things through. Then on the board, I am adding some more EQ. I'm pushing some bottom, pulling some like upper, low, mid-range, and then I'm pushing a big shelf at the top from the board as a group. The compression, check this out. Logic plugin, not using anything fancy here. I like this one. I also like the silver version of this, but in this case I have the black face, medium attack, fast release, 4-to-1, just trying to add a little bit more excitement, a little punch from there. Oh, and I do like on the Logic, the distortion over here, the soft clip. It adds some gain, but it also adds some saturation, and I kind of like that. And these toms, they needed it. They needed some help. So I added that in there. That's the basic drum sound. I am doing a couple other things. See the overheads? I'm actually doing a little bit of filtering the bottom out and some of the top with this EQ, because the filters are fantastic. Even if you only use the filters, it's awesome. And I'm doing the same thing on both. I am notching out something, again, with the channel EQ from Logic. A little bit of notching and filtering on the room mics. You can see I'm rolling a little off this set. And here's the other one. The big rooms, which were the Delphos. If you haven't seen that reamping video, go watch it. You can kind of see what we did there. So that's our drum sound in a nutshell right there. So all the pieces together, everybody's on. Let's hear it real quick. So that boom that's coming from the kick drums, a little bit of that dynamite getting blown up, and then some of our reamped drum rooms that are adding that. And it's cool, I think. All right, moving on. Drums are fun, but let's go to some bass, baby. Okay, let me get rid of that. So the bass, 2 things happening here. One, I like the bass tones that Ernesto and I got. We were really happy with them. So I'm using one of my other dynamites just for a little bit more compression because I like the sound of what the dynamites do to a bass. Also just helping kind of keep it right there so the bass doesn't move. It stays really consistent for the whole tune, which was cool. So that is just the normal bass tone, or I'm sorry, the actual bass tone. The parallel, which comes up on the monitor return above it, is going through the WA76. And for this more aggressive stuff, I really like all buttons in. I'm kind of going for attitude. you can hear it breaking up and adding some more distortion. So here, let's hear both of those. I will mute, and this is, I'll start with just the regular bass tone through the dynamite, and then I'll add the parallel in. So it adds a little bit of volume, also adds a little extra aggression, because Ernesto and I finished this mix last night. You know, I mixed most of the day, got it to a point I liked it, had him come over with some fresh ears, and we finished tweaking things out. He's actually mastering right now, so it's gonna be killer. But we liked the just using a little bit of the distorted bass amp in there just so it cut through, but we still retained some of the low end. And then I used the WA-76 to add a little bit more harmonic goodness with that all buttons in. And for that, I do really like the WA-76 in that all buttons in mode. All right, guitars. I'm just gonna pull the heavy ones up first. So let's go to the chorus. And here's our big guitars on the chorus. They are getting a little bit of EQ. I'm pulling some bottom off. I am pushing just a little bit of high mid on there. So here is no EQ. So you can hear it kind of brightens them up a little bit. And I should note that none of these EQ decisions are made in solo like this. It was all listening. Once I kind of just pulled everything up and I'm listening, and as I start to do initial like EQ moves, I just kind of go with what I feel is missing. And in this case, why I'm rolling off some of the bottom of the guitars is there's certain things with the Marshall especially that it gets a little bit boomy on certain chords, and it got in the way of the bass. So I wanted to take some of that out without killing it completely. And then overall, as the drums started to get bigger, I needed the guitars just to have a little bit of cut in the high mids. And I didn't want to add much because I really like the tones that Ernesto dialed up. I didn't want to change that much. They're cool. I just needed to kind of be able to come out of the speakers a little bit more. And I should say all these electrics, the heavy stuff, bone dry. There isn't an ounce of reverb on them. And we kind of did that on purpose. And actually, no, I'll make it, well, yeah, I will do it right now. I want to say one thing about the overall panning of this too, because those guitars are out wide. So my drums, in something like this, I almost never pan my drums hard left, hard right. The rooms, yes, but overheads, toms, those things, they'll stay in a little bit. So my guitars live on those outsides. I don't want them to compete with hi-hats or extra cymbals. And quite frankly, I am not a huge fan of center left right panning with drums, especially with toms. It's just, being a drummer, it's not how a drum set sounds to me. If I stand in front of it at any point, I don't hear a tom over here and a tom over here, so I like it for me to feel natural. That's a case-by-case basis. If it's something like this, it's my own song or whatever, I get to do it that way. Sometimes with clients, they like it that way, so we change it. But me personally, I like to hear it as I hear the drum set, just a little bit of width, and then I want to save the outside for my wide guitars. Anyway, rant over. All right, clean. There is a lot of crap going on here. First off, there are clean guitars. This is the verse. Here, I'll bring in some bass and drums just to hear. That happens on both of the verses, just real simple arpeggio. Here's where things get interesting. We call this circus music. This is the pre-chorus, and there's a lot going on. Okay, so there's a few things here. Let me turn off. There is, first off, let me turn this guy off. We have these weird kind of, it's actually the same performance with two different amps mic'd two different ways. And then in the middle of that, And underneath that is the electric. Now, interesting, if you hear them on their own, there's a texture to it. When you hear them with everything, they separate from the electric. The wide, chunky guitars actually feel kind of closer. I am pushing on the board a fair amount of mid-range and some high mid, probably in, I don't know, like 500 or 600 places that you don't normally do it. And I was looking for something to separate and just sound different. And I liked how that sounded different. It was kind of cool. I'm also pushing quite a bit of, the console's not labeled, but I'm gonna have to save 4 or 5K in that area, and then I'm rolling off a shelf probably up around 10K. Because I wanted them to sit in a completely different place than the other electric guitars, because it gets, with the layers and the crazy like circus thing going on, it gets to be a bit much. Now, all of this stuff goes over here to my AllMusic comp. This is the Comp 54s. And here's what that sounds like with the electric guitars. They're all electric. Here's what it sounds like with the distorted guitars. So if I go, I'll bring those in. So direct distorted guitars. Off. On. See, it adds a little volume, but the mid-range from those Comp 54s, I don't know what's going on in there, but it's so cool for guitars. Now the clean guitars, the same thing. So here's that effect. Actually, let me mute those so they're not going there. So here's the pre-chorus. And everybody together. Here, I'll start off. It adds a little extra thickness, and it's cool. Some girth, basically just trying to kind of saturate things a little bit. Then, last but not least in the guitars, that is, and this is where we'll get into the effects bus computer for a second. Let me go to the good old melody. So let's go to that first verse. Okay, so here is where our guitar melody comes in. That is getting, you see on the inserts I have something for the solo and the melody, not compression. I'm running those through my overstayer channel amps because the cool thing about those is they have an option for second and third order harmonics. So you can just, instead of compressing this stuff, I wanted to add a little bit of thickness from some harmonics really, and just kind of round it off a little bit. And the way he's playing it kind of accentuates the grittiness of things. So that melody, I'm adding a little gain too. And the same thing on the solo. Now, let's get into the fun part. The effects bus computer. What I'm doing with this, I have over here, I just had an extra ultralight, or Nesto had an extra ultralight laying around. So I decided to hook to this computer so I can hook up my outboard effects over here. In this case, I've got a couple quad reverbs, a MIDI verb, a TCD2, then I have random old stuff from the 80s. I am using an old Digi 128 on this that I think is pretty cool. That's on the solo. But with this computer, I stick these guys over here in the rack in the I/O plug-in. That allows me to send from the board, and usually what goes over there comes out of the direct output of the channel. So my direct out of 19 and 20 in this case, which is the melody and the guitar solos, in the patch bay get fed over to the ultralight, which go to this computer. I have 2 channels coming in and I have 2 channels with I/O. So the I/O plug-in for the melodies is the Digitech 128 feeding the Alesis MIDI Verb, the MIDI Verb 2. And I can automate what's getting sent here. So one, on the noisy stuff, it lets me get rid of, automate it off so we don't have the extra hiss. But I can also control like volume throws, so I can control how much I'm sending to the reverb, and I can send how loud the reverb is coming back out to the effects returns on the board. And it's kind of, it makes it kind of like a plug-in. Yeah, I can't automate every single parameter, but I don't often need to do that, so it's not a big deal. If I wanted to do that, I would just mess with it, print it, and then have it come back an audio channel. But this lets me do it in real time, and since I didn't know what I was looking for initially, I kept things in real time. So here is the melody dry. Here's the effects bus return from the other computer. And I went for something that wasn't typical, delay. I wanted something, there was a lot of space here, so I wanted it to be kind of longer and keep going. So the Digitech is doing a bit of a delay, and then the microverb is the short, warm plate, I believe. So here's what they sound like together. And I thought it's kind of long. It's kind of cool. There's a lot of room there for it to take up. Now, the way the computers talk to each other, I have an Ethernet cable going from the main audio computer over to the laptop here. And the main computer is transmitting MIDI timecode, and the other one is listening for it. And that way, this session mirrors this session, so it's easy. Even all my markers, everything are in there, so it's really easy to see if I'm over there doing any automation. Next, the guitar solo. We'll just do these first and then we'll run through everything. Where are you? GT solo. Here we go, dry. I went for something a little shorter, a little faster, because I wanted to be more responsive with what Ernesto was playing, plus give a very different vibe than what was on the verses. And that is the quad reverb, one of my tweaked out settings. I have a handful of them that I've tweaked out and I continue to do. And that is on an I/O plugin in that computer. And it has worked really, really well. And it's made using this outboard stuff even more fun and more usable. Like I said, sometimes if I have an idea already in mind, before I set up the whole mix, I may go through and print a bunch of this stuff, and I'll just have audio files in the computer, and then I'll have them come out, usually up there on my in-the-box effects return, they'll come out there, or if I have an extra channel down here, or sometimes on the monitor return. In this case, I wasn't quite sure, and I wanted to be able to have my hands on tweaking it, so I pulled it up on that computer, and then I just tweaked things. Actually had a lot of fun. So that is pretty much all the pieces of the mix. Oh, last, I haven't mentioned the two-bus. This is starts with AMS Neve 8803 EQ. I almost always cut some 30 hertz and below with it. Then I push a little bit of bottom, usually about a 50 hertz shelf right in that area, and then I push about a 10K shelf on the top just a little bit. I'm not doing a lot, and that is on from the get-go. That is pushing into my Smart Research C1, which is always 2-to-1 slow attack, fast release. It is not on the insert for the master. It is after. So my blue fader here actually is how much volume I'm pushing into that chain. So if at any point I'm pushing too much and I want to back it down, I usually never go past probably 3 to 4 dB of reduction right in there. It just seems to be a sweet spot for that, and I like the sound of it. I can control that with the blue fader. So if I'm really pushing everything here hard and I look down and go, holy crap, and it's kind of sounded crunchy, I can just back off what I'm throwing into it. Likewise, if I have something that isn't as dense as this mix, where sometimes I'm pushing it harder, I can ride the fader up and into that. And that's everything in a nutshell on this, for the most part. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments. I'll do my best to try to answer everything, because I know this is kind of a long video, and I'm kind of breezing over things. I'm gonna end this with the drum solo because I'm the drummer and I can. There you go. There's my 2009 drum solo. Probably the last time I played a solo, really. All right, so that's everything. I hope you guys have enjoyed watching this whole kind of mini-series thing. We've had a hell of a time doing it. It's been a lot of fun. As soon as this is out officially, because I got it in a little bit late, I will put links everywhere. We're putting it out through DistroKid. Link in the description still to the Ultimate DistroKid discount. So if you're getting ready to put some new music out and you don't yet have your online distributor, I'm from Kansas. English is not my first language. Check out DistroKid. You get a little discount with our code. So anyway, everybody, please stay safe and happy recording, mixing, and just making music in general. Take care.